Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the live chat with the center. We also, if you're having any technical difficulties, please turn off your speakers and turn them back on, or you can refresh the page. You can also reach out to the help desk for more assistance. We really want to welcome you today to having the Normalcy conversation, policy and programs about developmentally appropriate services for children, youth, and young adults. Throughout this session, our guide will be available in our resource center for you to download, look at some now, and hopefully look at a lot more after our session today. We're going to start talking about authentic voices and normalcy videos that have been created through the Center for States. These videos are done with the purpose of giving families time and a voice to really talk more about normalcy, their personal experience, and policy experiences throughout the country. My family had an opportunity to go and do one of these videos. I'd like to share it with you now and then talk a little bit more about it after you see the video. All videos today are done with an audio description, which allows for 508 accommodations through the ADA.
Capacity Building, Center for States logo, Children's Bureau logo. Title, Authentic Voices Video Series, Adoptive Family. Title, Negotiating Normal. Interview with Saya, Caucasian female, young adult, formerly in foster care.
Normalcy is so different for everybody. It really is. It depends on your situation. It depends on your past.
Video, Saya with her adoptive parents, Amanda and Dina, two Caucasian females, sit and talk with Caucasian male, relaxed and informal conversation. Interview with Saya.
And it mostly is like, well, depending on the things that have happened in your situation or in your past, you get a certain set of rules when you get in foster care. And sometimes normalcy is supposed to be like normal activities that you do on a daily basis.
Interview with Amanda, Caucasian female, adoptive parent.
Normalcy is such a hard word because I don't know what teenager looks back on their teen years and says, gosh, what a normal experience. Or my parents were so great when I was a teenager. And so I think when we are working with a new teen, we go into it knowing the teen may or may not feel like this is a normal experience.
Photograph, Saya as a teenager with her adoptive parents, Amanda and Dina. Interview with Amanda.
So we have to make it what we perceive as the most normal, given that situation.
Interview with Saya.
Like, say, dyeing my hair or getting my ears pierced. If I was in foster care, I would have to get permission from my biological parents. I would have to go through the court system, and it sounds silly, it really does. There's a lot of road blocking.
Center photograph. Saya stands with Amanda under black and white umbrella, smiling. Photograph. Saya in a gift shop with a heart balloon around her head. Interview with Saya.
But normalcy to me is extremely important, especially in foster care with kids who have constantly been from home to home and they have no sense of normalcy.
Interview with Dina, Caucasian female, adoptive parent.
Everyone says normalcy, but nothing's normal about foster care. You know, so I don't like that word.
So normalcy is a negotiation. It's a time where we get to sit down with youth, with caseworkers, with the agency, and really figure out for that youth in a specific context, how can we make things normal, positive, engaging, and hopefully, ultimately, enjoyable, and something that a youth can look back on and say that their childhood prepared them and helped them develop for a successful adulthood. I think that it is a major culture shift and something that if it's not done correctly and not done pervasively for a long time throughout our careers and our lives in child welfare, it doesn't stick as well. So being aware that this is not just a one-day conversation, it's not something that we can put a policy or a law around and it fixes everything, but that it is a long-time investment in our youth and our culture and in child welfare in general. That being said, today we have a panel and we have a wonderful, hopefully, conversation both with each other that we'll present to you, and then later question and answers that we're going to share with all of you and have a much deeper discussion and a better understanding of how to implement all of this back in your home state. I have joining me as a co-moderator Desiree Parker, who is a former youth in foster care from Wisconsin. She's also a social worker extraordinaire, and I'm very pleased to be here on the panel with her. We also have Karen McGormley from Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and then Jenny Pekempner from the Juvenile Law Center. And I wanted to give you, Karen, just a minute or two to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I've actually been in child welfare now for just over 22 years. Most of those years have been spent at a county child welfare organization where I was an ongoing social worker, an adoption social worker, and then also did some supervision in adoption. About 3 years ago, I moved to our state office in Ohio. And just to give people some background, Ohio is a county administered state supervised state. And so at the state level, I now am a supervisor over substitute care and permanency policy.
Thank you. Jenny, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I work at the Juvenile Law Center. We're located in Philadelphia. We're the oldest legal advocacy organization working on behalf of kids in the juvenile justice and child welfare system. We work in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and nationally on policy reform. I've been there for about 15 years, and my focus for that whole time has really been on older youth policies, improving outcomes for them in both systems.
Great, thank you so much. Karen, can you discuss a little bit about the importance of normalcy and what kind of led to this law, this implementation, and of course this resource guide?
Right. Yeah, well, normalcy is important because we're learning that as we're giving children and youth the opportunity to participate in activities, that we're actually providing them with vital tools that they need in order to prepare for adulthood. Prior to the normalcy laws and changes, we were so focused on the safety of the children that we didn't put any weight on what their well-being is. So we basically were overbearing parents. Decisions were being made because of fear of liability issues.
Can you give a specific example from Ohio? Sometimes that helps,
Right.
Really seeing something that's happened.
Right, yeah, and I actually have a friend that works at a county child welfare agency in Ohio. But every year she likes to do holiday cookies with the neighborhood kids, in her neighborhood, of course. And so this past year, you know, she was getting all the neighborhoods together, making the calls, and some of the kids happened to be foster children with her own agency. But before she could allow those children to come over to bake cookies, she had to go in and get fingerprinted. She had to have somebody come out and do a walkthrough of her home to make sure that she was okay to be around these children, even though, of course, she was already okay and had been vetted as an employee for that agency.
So Karen, with this topic of normalcy, why does this matter for youth and children in care?
That's a great question, Desiree. It's really, studies have shown that real life experiences are essential for youth, especially adolescents. It helps in brain development. It combats a lot of the trauma that they've experienced, and it also builds social capital for them. You know, so we need to have these discussions about all of these long-term positive impacts on the youth with all of our stakeholders, so they understand that this just isn't something, a fad or something new, that it really is going to make a difference for these kids, so that we can see the successes that we haven't seen with these kids as they age out of care or go back to their families.
Jenny, for you specifically in the work that you do, why does normalcy matter for the youth and children that you work with?
I mean, it's so important. As a value in itself, I think it's important. A lot of youth leading up to this legislation really talked about feeling different and having different treatment than their peers. So I think giving parity, given the same opportunities is important to youth, and that's extremely valuable. But what I think is exciting, and hopefully something that will help with implementation about normalcy, is that it really is going to improve our other child welfare outcomes. It's not, it's really going to enhance everything we're doing and that we really have to do under the law. So thinking about participation in activities activities like sports, like debate club, volunteering. Karen mentioned the skills you develop that are valuable as you transition to adulthood, that put you in a position to build your resume, get a job. Those kinds of things are concretely valuable. We need to do transition planning. You also think about developing social skills that really help with healing traumatic events, healing and figuring out how to form trusting relationships, which is often a big issue. And I think another really important portion, we talked about permanency in the last session, is the more we expose kids to a social network of supportive adults, we really increase the chance that they will have a true safety net to help with that transition and really open up the chances of permanency. So I think that's really important. And finally, kind of linking up a lot of the things we've talked about today, is it is so connected to safety and all the things we're talking about in preventing sex trafficking. What keeps kids in the community, prevents them from running away, prevents them from being vulnerable to victimization, is when they're attached to places through activities and attached to people. Many of us have heard Jennifer Rodriguez from the Youth Law Center speak, and she really compellingly talks about activities. Debate was one of the things that she did as giving you roots but also wings. It helps you see to the future, but it does attach you and make you want to stay and have things to care about. So I think it is helpful when you're introducing this new, really, it's a mandate, really helping people understand this is something, as Karen said, that's new, yet it builds on everything you're doing and should be enhance the quality and your ability to achieve the goals you have.
Thank you for that information.
Karen, I want to shift a little bit and talk about stakeholders. We all know stakeholders are important and really are key to everything we do.
Right.
How do we get stakeholders on board, and specifically in Ohio, and how do you keep them on board for something like this that is such a long-term implementation?
Right, so when all these changes started coming about, and again, Ohio's law and the federal law, we felt in Ohio we needed to see where we were at. So what type of activities were kids allowed to do? So we, along with some of our stakeholders, created a survey that we put out to our county child welfare agencies as well as our private, residential, and foster care agencies. And that was, really insightful to see that they didn't always see eye to eye, the different stakeholders that we had. So we had to tackle that issue first. And what I would advise other states to do is also consider including with youth and foster parents in getting those surveys completed to get a real good feel of where you're at. We also started the process of, with our training department, developing a training for foster parents because that was something new with the federal law. And once we started that and we were hearing from some of the other stakeholders, they were saying we need to be trained too. So thankfully we had some foster parents who also were trainers that pretty quickly but thoroughly put together a training for especially the child welfare staff, caseworkers, supervisors, administrators. And so during those trainings, they actually at times were meeting together and going over real life scenarios on implementing the reasonable and prudent parent standard and how it would look like for each individual child based on their needs.
That's great, thank you. I think one thing that we've talked about a lot, not just today, but in this conversation in general, is that foster parents and caseworkers can either be amazing allies or amazing adversaries when it comes to normalcy implementation. So I think that's amazing work that you guys have done to make sure they were on the same page at the same time.
And I think, just to add, using examples and seeing what different stakeholders' responses are can really facilitate a discussion, but also help you see where are the trouble spots or where are the things we need to spend more time on. And I think that's great. And having real, the range of examples from the easiest one, can I play soccer, to things that really do involve things that we're kind of a little afraid of, young adults going out dating, doing things that might, that any teenager would do but involve a little more risk. So I think it's great to have those examples and not just give people information, provoke the discussion and hear what people have to say.
So Karen, we heard a little bit about how you discovered who your stakeholders were. Can you tell us more about how you had those stakeholders actually buy into this process and idea of normalcy?
Right. Yeah, well, we actually just tried to keep normalcy and the reasonable prudent parent standard in the forefront. We were writing articles for any publication we could. A lot of stakeholders were really interested in what are these changes, what can you tell us so that we can be successful in this. So they were inviting us to their meetings. If they weren't, we actually were reaching out to them and kind of inviting ourselves to their meetings. We also, tried to give clear guidance, especially with regards to a lot of myths that were out there in Ohio about haircuts for children, or that everybody that was near a child had to have a background check, and just give them solid information. We also have like a lot, with any new change, you're going to have those early adopters that really want to make the change. So your cheerleaders, your champions. So we partnered with them to also get the word out. And then finally, another thing we did was we have a really strong youth advisory board in Ohio. And so they went around statewide and, were telling their story and telling why it's important. And of course, anytime you have a youth or a former, foster youth in care, telling their story, those real life experiences are really impactful, and those are going to get people on board when they say this is a real person and this is how they were affected by not being able to do some of these things.
So it sounds like you use some of that firsthand lived experience as a way to impact decisions that were being made as far as normalcy is concerned for that buy-in as well
definitely.
with stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, the youth voice, I would say, is the most important voice. So.
Great, thank you.
So Jenny, the guide that we have, that I'm sure all of our viewers have now downloaded and are
read from page to page.
hopefully not reading while we're speaking, but have it saved so that they can look at it later. It talks a lot about infrastructure, and it talks about, in very concrete ways, how do we do infrastructure changes? Could you talk a little bit about that? I think examples, especially for that, we all know what infrastructure is in the abstract,
Yeah.
but really getting down into that detail really helps.
Sure. And I think it is really important because when you say infrastructure, I think people kind of zone out. It's the roads, it's the bridges, but it's the things that are so important, but yet we kind of take for granted. And so infrastructure in terms of normalcy, I think it is the policies, it is the supports that we put in place to, one, help caregivers make good decisions, but maybe even more importantly, enable youth to actually have access to the activities. So it's one thing to say yes or no, but when you say yes, what will allow the youth to actually take advantage of the experience? And I think that's something we have to deal with, both of those things, and create a system that makes those things function and work really well. And so some examples I think that would be helpful for agencies to think about is simply setting the expectation in your agency that you expect that youth will have access to the greatest extent possible to age-appropriate activities. So you're not just focusing on caregivers and decision making, but you're setting the tone for the kind of the culture you want. And then you're going to implement some policies that come from that expectation, but setting that out is important. I think many jurisdictions have. They've said it's about the reasonable and prudent parent standard, and it's about promoting normalcy and access. And saying both of those is important. It's also important to create a structure so that you think about the ways that you overcome barriers to getting to access to activities and making them possible. Things like transportation, things like funds if there's fees involved. And I think we really want to think through that because there are costs involved in making opportunities possible, but there's also work we can do to make that cost more feasible for the agency, for caregivers, for youth. But we need to think it through and have a system in place so that it's not an ad hoc, can you do this? And then it takes us a couple weeks to figure out, do we have funds for those kinds of things? So those are the types of examples of what is the infrastructure that would be in place. So once someone makes a good decision, we really can support making sure we can follow through with that.
That's great.
Karen, in terms of infrastructure, as far as caseworkers are concerned, how do we create an environment that really makes participating in that normalcy possible for caseworkers who are often overworked and feel underpaid?
Right, right. Well, and I think one thing, again, having that training, which initially we didn't realize that, and so they had to bring that to our attention to say, we need this, we need to train, we need to understand what it is and what our role is. And of course, caseworkers, they're the one stakeholder that kind of connect to all of the other stakeholders. You know, they're going out and seeing the child, they're going to their school, they're talking to the foster parent, they're also reporting out to the guardian ad litem or CASA and the judge at court hearings. And they're also the child's advocate at their own agency if there is a barrier there with regards to normalcy. So they play an integral part in this. One thing that we did in Ohio to make sure we kept it on the mind of the caseworkers is we changed our visitation rules. And so we made normalcy a required topic at each monthly visit, that they need to have that conversation with the foster parents to see, you know, what's going on with regards to normalcy, but also with the foster youth, as long as they're, you know, age or developmentally appropriate for that. To ensure that, again, that this isn't just something that's going to pass in the night, but it's going to be ingrained, and this is a change that we're going to make.
Jenny, do you have additional comments?
Sure. I think visitation is an excellent place and a very fitting place to build the normalcy conversation with youth and caregivers into the structure, because visitation is a requirement. It's something we're very familiar with. So as much of the implementation that we can do building on familiar practices and structures, I think that's going to help make it a regular thing. And so one of the tools that we've seen that we can make available to the audience, the Kansas Youth Advisory Council did a visitation tool several years ago, way before the normalcy provisions, and they did it to really improve the quality of visits between caseworkers and older youth. So it's a form, a template that can guide that visitation. What we did was did some minor revisions with their permission to add some of the normalcy inquiry. It's not perfect, and we'd love to get people's input on it, but I think it provides a nice tool that can really help structure your visitation so you make sure you have those normalcy conversations. The other thing that I think that's important about building it into visitation is that a lot of youth really do tell us that a lot of their contact with their caseworkers is really talking about court, it's talking about problems, what's going wrong, and they really want the caseworker to know them and their interests. And I think, you know, prompting the discussion about normalcy, what do you like to do, what do you enjoy? If you get the answer, which I think you might get from some teenagers, I don't know, I don't care, you know, you can have that, you're going to push forward, you're going to find something, you know, but I think that you really can use that to form that trusting relationship, to know that they don't just think about you as a case going to court, they want to know about your interests. And I think another area for kind of discussion in terms of bringing up the normalcy conversation and embedding it would be case planning, similar to the visitation. And so I think that what can be really helpful is amending some of our case plan forms and how we do case planning to make sure we have room for goals in terms of access to activities, and then that we have some steps for making those things possible. Do we need rides? Do we need to arrange for pickup later in the day because of a sports team practice, or there's a debate club, you know, activity, and is there going to be travel involved? You know, making sure we have all the supports in place, and it also helps us track. Again, case planning is like what drives everything we do, and so building it in will get people accustomed to this is core. This is like some of our treatment goals, our education goals. We have normalcy goals too, but we're not adding something new. We're not adding necessarily a new plan. We're using what we have and just building on it.
So I've heard you talk a lot about normalcy and youth being a part of that normalcy process. As far as infrastructure is concerned, can you give us some examples of how the youth voice can really be heard within that core process?
Sure, and we're lucky because we've got a lot of examples throughout the day, which is really exciting. I mean, the first is, you know, including youth. We're all in our states having these stakeholder meetings, building policy to implement the Strengthening Families Act. We need to include youth. And what was such a great example from Judge Romero earlier was saying, okay, if we're going to include youth, we're not just going to invite them to a meeting we've already scheduled and set the agenda for. We're going to schedule it at a time after school when they can attend. We're going to think about transportation. We're going to think about what they need to prep. Do they need to have some side meetings on their own, like he mentioned? Do we need to have some caseworkers or other peer advocates work with them to prep for the meetings? So if we want them part of these discussions, how do we really commit to doing that? And all those things take commitment of staff and finances, but that is what we need to do. Another way, as Karen mentioned, is surveys, and several jurisdictions are doing this, and I think they're an excellent way to do multiple things. They're a great way to get youth feedback, both about what's happening now and then helping us track progress going forward. They're also a way to share information, because you're asking about things about the normalcy provision. You can ask them other things as well, so you're educating at the same time. We have access to, Karen, you have your survey. We have several other jurisdictions, Tennessee, Iowa. I think there's several others who I think are very open to sharing those surveys. And most of them, Nebraska as well, did youth, but also some did caregivers and caseworkers as well. So you can do it for a lot of different ways, but particularly for youth, it is a great way. And at this point, they're very familiar with getting surveys, pop-up surveys, and also, you know, a lot of the surveys we have as templates are short and I think manageable. Another way to think about youth involvement is all these trainings that we have to develop, and I'm so glad that you guys are thinking, you know, we only are mandated to train caregivers, but that kind of makes no sense to only train caregivers and not all the people that need to support them. So I think that's fantastic. But including youth and developing the trainings, but also as co-trainers, is a great way to build in the voice. And as you said, you know, you can bring some authentic voice videos and some other videos, but great to have the youth right there as a trainer telling their story, but also, you know, sharing the information and the skills they want to convey. So I think there's a lot of ways to do this, but I think you have to have a concrete plan for including them and the staff and support to really make it possible and to do it well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Karen, I have a quick question for you before we move on to our top 5 exciting list that everyone stays tuned for. How did your state use the guide, and why was that really important for your state?
Well, I think it's important. I think of the guide as I compare it to a recipe. Again, it ensures that you have all the ingredients that you need, and in this case, the ingredients are the stakeholders. And then it gives you kind of a step-by-step instructions. And you need to tailor it a little bit for each state, because each state's going to be different. But the end result then will be, you know, a quality product that hopefully doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth.
I like that. Thank you. So we're going to talk now about our top 5 most frequently asked questions regarding normalcy implementation. These are not necessarily the most important, and our answers may or may not relate directly to your state, but we really wanted to look at the 4 of us and what we've heard in different states about implementation and areas that people have the most questions, the most concerns. So very late night show style, we're going to start with number 5. How do we pay for activities and opportunities we want youth to take advantage of?
Right. So basically, I mean, anytime you're talking about finances, I mean, that's a tough conversation, because again, finances, especially for child welfare, are going to be limited. They're not never ending. And so I think the key for that is to tackle it up front, you know, with all of the stakeholders and see, you know, what is out there and what type of, you know, solutions that you can come up with. And so we kind of talked about some different ones. One, of course, is for older youth is Chafee funds, you know, that could be used for this purpose now because of the Strengthening Family Act changes. You know, I also like to let people know that, again, with older youth who are also working on independent living plans and building their life skills, that it's okay to split cost as well. So if it's a camp that the child really wants to go to, and maybe they're working, or even if they're not working, if they're getting an allowance or having chores, you know, say, okay, well, youth, you pay 1/3, foster mom, can you chip in 1/3, and then the agency will pay for 1/3. Because I think that what that's showing that youth is that, you know, earning and saving money on what you want to spend it on is important, and sometimes to get what you really want, you know, you can contribute to that as well. Now, that shouldn't be for every minor activity that, you know, we know that some kids get, but again, I think for older kids, that's going to help them.
And I think, you know, a lot of states do have policies and currently are doing this. They have ways either to build the cost into the rate, the cost of care, or they have procedures of how you could request funds. I think what states need to do at this point is really take that to scale and also let people know, you know, that it's not a secret fund that you tap into, that you really think about it, you know, letting people know about it, the procedures for accessing it. And as Karen said, I mean, we really do need to think through and pull people together to try to get a figure of what do we think the cost is. Because without some of that thinking through and having those specifics, we are kind of planning in fear and also of the worst case scenario. So we really do want to see, I think we have to admit, and everyone's brought up that there's costs, and we have to have a plan for dealing with it. And I think that what is really helpful, and as Karen mentioned, bringing together stakeholders, is thinking about other stakeholders, ones that we're probably using already, but more on an ad hoc basis. So bringing together stakeholders like the YMCA, the Rotary clubs, even establishing memorandums of understanding to say, you know, YMCA, will you provide a certain amount of memberships per year that youth in foster care can use? Seeing if the Rotary Club will agree that each year they'll pay for fees in certain areas, maybe they're interested in sports. I think what's important and what we're really required to do at this point to make this work, to build the infrastructure, is we can't have it be ad hoc. We have to have a system, either memorandums of understanding or whatever it is that's solid enough, so when that call comes in, how are we going to problem solve this? It's not going to take 2 months, 3 months to figure it out, that we have a way of, well, this is how we deal with sports fees, this is how we deal with travel, and that we have a system set up. And I think we have a lot of really talented people in our child welfare agencies that do this on an individual basis in their cases and bring them to the table, because that skill set is there. We just now have to like systematize it and take it to scale. In addition to, we do have to look at how we're paying foster parents. I mean, it's unavoidable to see, are we paying them enough to support all of these things that we want them to do for kids and care for them with the high quality we want.
So talking about costs and things that can be pretty expensive, number 4 on our list discusses traveling.
Yep.
So how do we address excursions, trips, and travel of different time periods, distance, and with different types of people?
I think Jenny's going to tackle
Yep.
that one.
So it's really clear from the federal statute that travel, excursions, sleepovers, trips were intended to be covered in the reasonable and prudent parent standard. And so that's really clear. I think what we see is that, you know, all travel is not equal. There's very far distances out of the country, there's very long time periods. So I think it's reasonable to say we want to proceed and put policies in place that really get, you know, people to think about the different types of trips. We can, I think, acknowledge that for longer time periods, you know, and for longer distances, there might be more procedures, but we want to design procedures that kind of are consistent with this idea that we want to promote every opportunity and make it happen. We don't want to just put red tape in place. So I think it's understandable to say, you know, a trip out of the country, you know, we want to know about it, we want to talk about it, but not for the purposes of blocking it. The other thing with all of the decision making that we're talking about with normalcy is that we do have to understand that this is a very important value, but we're balancing it with a lot of other priorities. So travel, one thing I think that would automatically come to mind is, you know, if you do have parent and sibling visitation, you really have to negotiate in a way to balance all those objectives. So I think that we want to have policies that, you know, look at the different types of travel, that generally you have the ethic that you want to promote these, some which can be really exciting and valuable experiences, but that we do want to think about the different types of trips and how we make sure we have everyone on the same page.
Absolutely, thank you. Question number 3, How should we address grooming and alterations to the body? Specifically talking about haircuts, dressing, related to gender identity, LGBTQ youth, or even tattoos that have emotional significance.
Well, and just as Jenny said, all travel is not equal. All grooming is not equal either. And a lot of it, honestly, kind of comes down to common sense. There's going to be some grooming that, of course, if it's a cultural or religious thing based, grooming, then you need to consult with the birth parents and on those matters. There's also going to be times that, kids are finding out who they are, and especially with dress, I think they, that's where they show who they are, or who, they're toying around with who they are, I should say. But, and so on those occasions, one thing that I've found even with my own kids is schools often have dress codes as well, so that can help a parent if you're not quite agreeing with the dress that your child wants, that, okay, well, you can as long as it's within school dress code, things like that. But I think you have to allow those, allow teens and adolescents to experiment and try to find out, where they're going to fit at in the world. Other things with haircuts as well, we had a big myth in Ohio that you just couldn't cut any foster child's hair unless you had permission from the parent. And I think that came out of that whole cultural or religious, or if you have a new foster child in your home and his hair is long and flowing and it's never been cut, well, as a foster parent, maybe you shouldn't go and give him a buzz cut or give him a mohawk. You definitely want to consult with mom. But on the other end, it is good to get trims. So, go to the $5 haircut place and take off an inch, and I think that's a decision that foster care can make, and also, a teenager can make on their own event if they're taking themselves to get their haircut. So again, I think a lot of it's just common sense, thinking about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's common sense, and it's also thinking about the different rights that are implicated. That, as Karen said, you think that implicate religious and cultural significance. You do want to be more inclusive and get more input. And I think what's also helpful to introduce, as you talked about a child's own identity, is that we're also talking about there's some of these decisions that really are the young person's, and we have other laws and regulations to look at. So most of our foster care systems have some Bill of Rights or regulation about a child's right to kind of dignity and respect, or prohibitions against discrimination based on sexual orientation, and most of us are hoping and moving towards that. But so dressing and asserting your identity, sometimes the conversation isn't does the parent or the child get, the parent or the foster parent get to make the decision, but does the child. So I think we just want to, for these issues, I think they're great issues and important issues to think about, but that we have to kind of negotiate all those things. And I think the other really great thing that Karen said that I think we do want to highlight in this discussion about normalcy in general is that a lot of our focus is on what does the law allow? Who does the law allow to make the decision? And sometimes the question will be the law allows the caregiver to make the decision, but still it's good case planning and good for the case to bring everyone in. So I think that goes to the common sense and just bringing us back of we have this core value that we're bringing in to the system, and we have to braid it, marry it with the other values as well, and we don't push the others aside, but we build them all in. And then that big topic of tattooing and piercing that we all get, it's really actually a fairly easy answer that most states, I didn't do a 50-state survey, but most states do have laws on piercing, body piercing. Not all states cover piercing of your ears. Body piercing and tattooing, and really most states children cannot get those things done without their parents' consent. Mm-hmm. And those would be laws, if people really want to change those laws, you'd have to, the normalcy provisions don't eradicate those laws. So that doesn't take the question off the table, but it does say, check on what your state law says about some of these things. And that just might help give you some guidance.
So number 2 on our top 5 list addresses weapons, and I know that being from Wisconsin, a lot of times we get questions about hunting. So specifically for your states or information that you know about from around the country, how would you address this discussion of weapons and youth in care using weapons?
So I get the piercings and the weapons.
Yes, we got that.
My expertise. So weapons for recreational use, the examples you give of hunting and other things, they are part of that reasonable and prudent parent standard of the types of decisions that a caregiver can make. I think, again, where you want to start with is, does your state have any laws about access to any safety requirements, anything you need to know? Some do, some don't, and you need to follow those, and you could only give permission if you were, following all those dictates. But then I think it is just another activity that you have to take the same kind of, factoring in both the young person's, readiness, ability, how much practice they have, and then what kind of safety precautions you have built in, whether it's equipment, supervision, those sorts of things. So it is a hot topic or a potentially controversial topic, but it is, I think you put it in that same framework. I mean, any weapon has some potential safety threats that are heightened, and so that's part of your, I think, consideration and calculation. But I think, again, states need to start with, do we have any rules and regulations that we need to make sure people are aware of? Many know, because like you said, certain states, probably all of our states, different jurisdictions where there is more sport that's related to hunting and things like that, so they know, but that's where I would always start. What does our law say about how children can participate in these activities? But then build it into your framework for good decision making.
That's great. Thank you. So we've got about 1 minute for
Okay.
this next one.
Real quick.
So number 1, we're going to do this, I guess, auctioneer style.
Yes.
How does the new law impact a youth's ability to drive cars, other vehicles for sport or recreation?
Right. Well, the quick answer to that is that the reasonable and prudent parent standard laws don't impact. Again, looking back at state laws, a lot of states have laws on who can sign for a child to get a temporary permit and or a driver's license then, and who has to be in the car for the required hours when they're under the age of 18. So that's kind of the simple answer. It hasn't impacted that too much. You really need to look at what those state laws are. Another thing that I know in Ohio we've talked about is, even if we can't get them learner's permits and driver's license, though some of our counties are moving in that direction, can we at least get them through driver's education before they age out of care? And so we've kind of focused on that. But again, I think that might be somewhere down the road in which states might, like some other states have. I know Florida's changed their driver's license laws to allow foster parents to sign for things like that. And hey, they've set up some great insurance programs down in Florida. So I think those are, again, the early adapters in the nation. But for a lot of the other states, I think that's a down the road kind of thing to work on as they get better and better in implementing normalcy and reasonable and prudent parent in their state.
So one last quick question for the both of you, talking about normalcy in these top 5. How would you ensure normalcy for youth of all ages, whether it's an 18-year-old or a six-year-old?
Right. Yeah, well, and I think regardless of age, the important thing with normalcy and the reasonable prudent parent is that it has to be tailored to the individual child or youth. So for younger kids, a lot of the activities that they're going to be involved in are going to help them build socialization skills and some early relationship skills. So a lot of those, though, are still going to have direct adult supervision, whether it's the foster caregiver or another adult, like a coach, things like that. So you're talking about sports teams, karate, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, or even, play dates. And again, for older youth, as we've talked about, they're building life skills and learning how to build trusting relationships. And part of it is risk-taking for those older youth, and that's why, letting them have some time alone and going to the mall with their friends, or to an overnight at a friend's house, or even to the Washington, D.C. trip or whatever with the 8th graders. I think that's more vital for them as they, start getting prepared for adulthood.
Thank you. So now we have the opportunity to watch an authentic voice video from a former foster youth. This video is also compliant with ADA standards.
Capacity Building, Center for State's logo. Children's Bureau logo. Title, Authentic Voices Video Series. Young adult, formerly in foster care.
I went into the system with my 2 older brothers and then one of my younger sisters, who's only a year younger than me.
Title, This is My Family, Where I Call Home. Interview with Desiree, Caucasian female, formerly in foster care.
So growing up in that system, you understand the negatives, the positives, and then aging out of that system, you want to make a difference for those that are younger than you. I also had a foster family that really believed in me, and I lived there for 14 years. And that's very unheard of in the foster care system as well. To have that ability to say, hey, this is my family and this is where I call home, and I know that I'm gonna be sleeping here tonight, and I know that I'm gonna sleep here in 6 months from now and 3 years from now.
Photograph, Desiree in graduation cap and gown.
And I know that when I graduate from high school, I'm gonna have a graduation party.
Interview with Desiree.
And I don't have to worry about somebody putting my clothing in a garbage bag and saying, hey, you're 18 now, you gotta figure out where you're going.
Graphic, research shows that developmental relationships in young people's lives are important. The number and intensity of developmental relationships in young people's lives is linked to a range of positive educational outcomes. Relationships with caring adults and peers can increase student engagement and improve academic motivation. Citation, Search Institute website, 2016. Interview with Desiree.
A forever family to me is a family that you can call at any time and they pick up the phone in the middle of the night and they're there for you.
Photograph, Desiree with family sitting side by side in a field.
Normalcy for me was not having to tell my story.
Interview with Desiree.
When I was in high school, I remember being petrified of telling people that I was in care, because I'd grown up in that same home for so long that they just thought that I lived there and that's how my life was. And I remember being so afraid of having to tell them, that I was in care, because there's that stigma that if you're in care, you're a juvenile justice kid. You're a kid that got in trouble and that's why you're there, even though I had been there my whole life.
Photograph, Desiree with her arm around her brother.
As a former special needs adoption social worker, you really start to understand the importance of relationships for youth.
Interview with Desiree.
Even if they're tiny, tiny relationships, and let's say that the youth has only been in that home for a month, but there's someone in that home that they really built that connection with, you want to try to sustain that throughout their entire time and care, because that relationship, once they leave, could really be something powerful. So normalcy to me is having those relationships, not having to put myself out there as a foster child until I am comfortable with my story and decide to share that part of my story.
Photograph, Desiree wears helmet and zipline gear in wilderness setting. Interview with Desiree.
Having a place to call home and people to go home to for holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, people to move me into a dorm, people to call in the middle of the night when I have a question about something and I have no clue what I'm doing.
Photograph, Desiree stands at scenic overlook with ocean and islands behind her. Interview with Desiree.
So I think to facilitate normalcy within relationships, within the child welfare system, we really need to do a better job of training our foster parents. A lot of times foster parents that come in expecting to work with an older population don't understand all of the challenges and ways to treat that population normally. So if you have other youth that are in your home, let's say they're 10 years old and then you have a 16-year-old, what's normal for that 10-year-old might not be normal for that 16-year-old.
Desiree and friends sit and talk around picnic table. Interview with Desiree.
When you go in as a foster parent, saying you're going to work with older youth and you have that in-depth training, you know what you're in for. You know the struggles. You're willing to build that stronger relationship too.
Capacity Building, Center for State's logo. Children's Bureau logo. Fade to black.
A few key points to look at through this video, especially from the standpoint of a former foster youth. First of all, is to realize that normalcy is different for every foster youth and for every family. And looking at foster youth as that normalcy being different, as we talked about before, whether you're 16 or whether you're 8, and making sure that that normalcy is in place. If you're 16, you can go to a sleepover. If you're 8, you probably can't go to sleepover unless there's some type of supervision there. Also, for me, particularly in the video, normalcy for me was not telling people about my story and really being able to own my story as my own and not having to just share that with anyone just because I was a former foster youth and I had a good story to tell. It's important to remember that one size does not fit all for all foster youth.
Thank you so much, Desiree. I think I've had the opportunity to work with you a couple of different times and to watch your video, and I think it is so inspirational at so many levels and really helps me be a better foster parent and child welfare worker. So I hope that everyone else in the audience enjoyed it as well. We're now going to transition over to our question and answer time. You are able to ask your questions in our chat box, or more preferably the question and answer box that's located in your chat room. I wanted to ask, as we start to get some questions in, Jenny, could you just talk for a quick second about driver's licenses? It's not really talked about in the law itself, so why are we still talking about it, and what can we do to change the message?
Yeah, I think Karen's absolutely right. The law doesn't directly affect it, but we all are getting that question of, does this change things? And it doesn't, but what it does is it highlights a persistent problem. It's just that we need to have strategies to address those barriers. As Karen mentioned, barriers like, what does the law say about who can give permission? What are some of the structures around insurance coverage that make it harder for young people to get insurance or get on policies either of caregivers, or if they don't have a caregiver, how do they as minors get insurance? So I really do think it's a next step for people, but many jurisdictions are right now using the momentum of the focus on the normalcy conversation to push some reforms. And I think it is a good opportunity, because when you have these conversations with youth about what are some of those milestones, what do you think of as adolescence, those rites of passages, this is one of those things. So Karen mentioned Florida, their program is called Keys to Independence, which is a great name. But they're really open to talking with other states, because they really have a comprehensive law that talks about permission, talks about getting time on the road and what are the barriers to that, and also deals with insurance and insurance costs and contracting. So they really looked at the range of barriers. And so I think, as advocates, we want to leverage the focus on normalcy and push, because for many kids, a license isn't just about, it's fun, but in many parts of our country, it's about getting to school and getting to jobs, so it's a transition to adulthood thing. So definitely, if people are very interested in that, I think the Keys to Independence program is a great place to start for a model statute, and also talking with them about how they did it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the question.
So our first poll question today is, how likely would you be to use,
Excuse me. This is for Karen.
Karen, so we have a question for you. Were birth parents involved in the early process of shifting culture and climate around supporting normalcy for foster children since they had implemented?
Yeah, and I'll say the answer to that, at the state level we did not, but again, as being county administered, I know that, again, some of our early adopter counties, that when they were holding their stakeholder meetings and talking about the changes they were going to make to their policies and procedures, in Ohio we do have the luxury of having some birth parents who have, of course, gone through the system, gotten their children back, and so now can be supports for other birth families. And it's my understanding that, yes, they included these parents in some of those conversations as well, to kind of make sure that they had that voice as well, because it is very important. They are a key player, because this is their child. So,
and I think that that's such an important point. Prudent parenting does not eliminate the need for that birth-parent relationship. And I think sometimes when the law is first reviewed, that conversation does kind of get put on a back burner. But as states get more and more into that conversation and looking at how do we really implement, if birth parents had been at the table to begin with, it could have changed that initial conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
And I think the other thing to remember is, when we get really deep in implementation, get really in the weeds, it is always important to come back to why we're doing this. And it is for the young person, it is to get to those permanency, well-being, and safety outcomes. And so I think that can ground you to say, to remind you how important birth parents are, because this isn't about shifting power from a birth parent and giving it to caregiver. It's really about moving some of the decisions that we went to the agency in court for and saying they go to the caregiver. Because I think one of the problems you can have in implementation is a misunderstanding by birth parents that this is something that takes away from them and is meant to exclude them. And one, that's not the purpose, but two, we really don't want them to interpret that, because that is going to start, it's going to make practice a lot more difficult. So this is really about supporting young people so that they can, either go home to their parents or move to permanency. And so parents have to be part of this, but I think a lot of people have said in implementing that by not including parents and risking that misunderstanding, you can really create some barriers that we don't need to have, because that's not what the law is supposed to do.
Absolutely. In our home, we try to look at it as co-parent, like a triangle of co-parenting.
Right.
It's us as the foster parents, the birth parents, and the child welfare agency are all trying to make the best decisions. And hopefully most days we're just at the day-to-day decision-making part of that triangle.
Right. Well, yeah, and to add to that too, is that how great would it be, so if you have a child, whether they're going to be doing a violin concert or a band concert or play on the football team, to have the birth parents and the foster parents there to support them and cheer them on and know that they're being supported in that way.
Absolutely. So our next question is about sleepovers, and it can be to anybody. So sleepovers are one of the biggest things we talk about, both for younger kids and for teenagers. What do you guys recommend? How do you make sleepovers work?
I think that should be left up to the foster parents. I mean, and again, that was another big myth that we had in Ohio, that a lot of agency workers thought that there were state laws and rules that said that everybody that comes in contact with that child has to have a background check, has to have a walkthrough of their home. And so once we let them know, no, that's not the case. You entrust these children to these foster parents 24/7. You need to entrust them to say, to let a child go to a neighbor's house and ask those right questions, just as you would of your own child, so.
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, you make the decision as you would. You think about, ask the questions that you would as a parent. Is there going to be supervision?
Right.
Thinking about the age, thinking about all those things. So I think one of the things, everyone has stressed is that the answer isn't yes to everything. It's thinking through and asking the questions, but not erring on the side, but just having the kind of ethic that we want to promote good experiences. But even then, every request is not a yes. It isn't for anyone's children, so it's not going to be in this situation. So if the answer was no, it's a 12-year-old and there's no supervision, and you don't know the child or things like that. If you wouldn't let your own child do that, then you wouldn't let your own youth in care.
I think referring back to my Normalcy video as well, talking about for some foster youth, telling others that they're in care isn't normal. So having that discussion with family or other people that would have your child stay over at their home isn't going to be a normal conversation.
Yeah.
And just putting that child's story out there isn't very trauma-informed either.
Right.
And so really looking at, putting some of that responsibility on the foster parents as far as, can you make this decision? And yes, you have been given the opportunity to care for this child and make sure that they're well cared for. And so we think that you can make this decision as well, as far as whether these people are safe for your child to stay with.
Right. I was going to quote you as well and say one size does not fit all.
Yep. Right.
So it is about making that parenting decision.
Yep.
All right.
So due to time, we actually have a couple poll questions that should be coming up on your screen. We're not going to have time to go through those right now, but we would like to thank you for attending our session, and we want to encourage you to complete the evaluation as far as our session is concerned. We also want to remind you that we will be available for live chat, and there will be an exhibit booth that Amanda will be a part of as well. We'd like to encourage you to tune in at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for our next session, which is Looking Inside, Considerations and Approaches to Understanding and Implementing Normalcy Through the Congregate Care Lens. Thank you.